Welcome to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy, powered by the Retirement Income Store and brought to you by Agemy Financial Strategies in Guilford, Connecticut and Denver, Colorado.
Dad, listen to this clip. This is Janet Yellen on CNBC, and she's talking about where they're going to get the money to pay for all these bills that they're trying to pass trillions and trillions of dollars through right now.
This is a package that's paid for. We've proposed tax increases and improvements in enforcement that would serve to close what's estimated to be a $7 trillion tax gap over the next 10 years. So this is a fiscally responsible package. And the total spending is less than 1%. It's over 10 years, and it's less than 1% of GDP over those 10 years. In that sense, it's not very large.
$7 trillion.
And it's paid for.
Paid for? Are you kidding me? If it's paid for, why do they need to enforce anything? I mean, for those of us who are paying our fair share of taxes already and do taxes, we're not cheating on our taxes. What is there to enforce? It's crazy. Sounds to me like they're coming for our money. I'm Andrew Agemy.
And I'm Daniel Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies. Today we're talking about they're coming for you. Dad, this is an interesting thing we have going on here because $7 trillion is quite a lot of money to find in taxes. And I don't, I'm all about the government coming in and getting people who are cheating on taxes, right?
Yeah,
we're all going to pay our fair share of taxes. We enjoy the benefits we get is one thing, but you're not going to find there's not 7 trillion. This number is mind blowing. I mean, we started throwing trillion around Obama would never cross that line of $1 trillion. And then with COVID, they blew right past.
Right.
And now trillions not a big deal, right?
Right. The way billion wasn't a big deal years ago when they passed over from the millions into the billions. But $1 trillion, I mean, if you ever go on the internet and look at the difference between $1 billion and $1 trillion, and it shows in pallets and how much room you need to take up that much pallets of money kind of thing. It's phenomenal. $1 trillion versus $1 billion. But now they're not just talking about 1 trillion, it's 7 trillion. And it's paid for. How is it supposed to be paid for? I mean, I can't imagine that.
So we should probably dive into a little bit on some of the things that it's paid for with. So these laws that they're trying to push through in these packages, right, are going to give people a lot of money, but they're going to change tax codes, especially. So what Biden's been talking about, changing a lot of the tax codes. Right. And what they're saying is that it's going to only affect rich people. So that, I guess that depends what your definition of rich is.
Exactly.
Because if you're retired or you're thinking about retiring and you add up your house, you add up your retirement accounts, and you add up all these things, and you're worth $3-4 million, when you add all that up, then you're rich. And these changes are going to affect you tremendously. Right. Well, if you have more than that, they'll affect you more. But if you're Bezos, it doesn't matter, right? If you've got billions and billions and billions, it doesn't matter because you could hire any legal team, any attorney, anybody to hide your money in whatever island you want or those kinds of things.
Exactly. And that's not who we're talking to today on our show. Jeff Bezos is not listening to us. We're talking to the average Henry, a citizen kind of thing, Henry and Molly citizen. Right. And so with that, that's what we're talking about. And they're just trying to push the gap between the poor and the rich even farther apart. And they're trying to take that middle class and push them down into the poor category. And at this rate, you can see how they can do it because somebody today, we work with people in and close to retirement. And it's not uncommon for us to find just the regular, Henry Molly citizen having $3-4 million and they're not, and you wouldn't know it by looking at what they're driving or what their lifestyle or anything like that. They're not anything out of the ordinary. They're not filthy rich, but they have some assets. And it's these people that this is going to affect, especially if they're 65, 70 years old today. They have $3-4 million with these proposed changes, that by the time they die 10, 20, 30 years from now, that could mean that the government is just going to get a lot of money in taxes. And, there's all kinds of taxes, right? There's estate tax, there's income tax, there's capital gains tax, there's sales tax, there's all kinds of taxes that we pay. And, upon death right now, we have some very lucrative laws that are in our favor for those people. But that's what the Biden administration is trying to, and along with Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, right? So she's in charge of all the money in the country. Now they're putting in the Federal Reserve kind of like in there, and she with Jerome Powell, are handling responsible for all this money, and it's just something that they're looking to, the way it will be paid for over the next 10 years is in her clip that she says is that, it's through these laws that they're going to be changing and making. And like you say, and so that's what we need to talk about on today's show. And, I think that along with this, Daniel, that it'd be probably good to give out that commission report we have on 10 estate planning mistakes, because that's one of the things that estate planning today is one thing, but with what we see coming down the road with some of the proposed changes, estate planning will be something totally different. And I'd like, hopefully we can talk about that. But if you're in our listening audience that just tuned in, you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is they're coming for you. And we have this report that we'd like to put in your hands if you're so inclined. 10 estate planning mistakes to avoid, and how to start estate planning. It's a primer for estate planning, give you some of the basics that you can ask your attorney about, ask us about, whatever, to go into a little bit more depth. You can have that by calling 800-725-7616, 800-725-7616. We'll be glad to get that off to you. 10 estate planning mistakes, or ask for the estate planning paper. Okay. Daniel, so who is, today's topic is they're coming for you, and who is they? Who's coming for us?
Well, Jenny Yellen just told you in that clip that she's coming for you. Right now,
IRS, yeah.
When we, right now, when we're recording this, in that clip, she said how basically the government's going to shut down if Congress doesn't get their act together and figure out, raise the debt ceiling, right?
Right.
So their checking account is going to run out of money.
Right.
And they're not going to be able to write any checks. So we know that the U.S. is struggling with all this money between the problems that we had getting out of Iraq, between COVID, between all these things. So they're struggling financially. And what they've been doing to help out with that is they issue debt, right?
Yeah.
And then
bonds. Yeah.
People buy that. So bonds. So if it's the Federal Reserve buying it, or if it's China buying it, or if it's citizens, or if it's hedge funds, somebody's buying that debt. And then that's putting money into the U.S. Treasury checking account.
Right. Loaning money to the government to put into their checking account. Great.
So, like I said, I'm sure this will be resolved by the time this thing airs. But there's a couple of things where they say, well, instead of having a government shutdown, if they don't pass this, and I think it was 1994, they passed a bill basically said the Treasury Secretary is allowed to issue a coin at any denomination of their will. So some people are speculating that the Treasury is going to go out and issue $1 trillion platinum coin, right?
Right.
and then deposit that into their bank account with the Federal Reserve. And now there's $1 trillion in the bank account that they can draw from, right?
But so it's not backed by anything. Yeah.
So they're not going to default, right? They have ways to do this. We're not worried about that. They're either going to raise the debt ceiling or something like that's going to happen. But what we are talking about is all these things will start building up, right? The debt is not, you can't just continue to build debt up forever without having to pay the piper.
Right. Exactly.
And so the IRS has already shown us that they're willing to change rules that they gave savers in order to collect more in taxes. And so what am I talking about that? Well, I'm talking about when they changed the rule on stretch IRAs. You used to be able to stretch that IRA out. And so you only had to pay taxes on RMDs. Even after you passed away, your beneficiaries got that benefits. Well, now you don't get the benefit of a stretched IRA. You have to pay all the taxes on that IRA or whoever inherits your IRA from you.
Right. Yeah.
In 10 years. So that was a way they just collected a lot more in revenue. And
that's
so
right.
Some of these proposals in the Biden tax bills will shock people on how much money they could take out of your pocket.
Right. Exactly. It's terrible. People listening today, maybe they have 50,000 in their IRA, maybe they have $1 million in their IRA, maybe they have 5 million in their IRA, 10 million, whatever. But there are IRAs out there that are big money. And in a case like what you just said, that when they made that rule change, if you got $4 million in your IRA and it has to come out over a 10-year period of time now, that means the government over 10 years is going to get the taxes on that $4 million, whether it's $400,000 every year. And if it's $400,000 every year, that probably close to 50% of that's going to go in taxes. Or if it's the whole 4 million right in a lump sum. So it's just very crazy when you start adding this stuff up, and then we'll get into that after a break. We need to take a break here. And if you're just tuned in, you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. And today's topic is they're coming for you. The government's coming for you. IRS coming for you to be able to take your money. And we have to be prepared for that. So with that, we'd like to give you a book. If you are one of the next 5 callers at 800-725-7616. It's called Three Blind Mice by our friend Scotty McLean in New Jersey. And Scotty's written this book talking about how you can prepare and how sometimes people choose advisors, whether it's tax or it's legal or it's financial, that don't work with each other. And even though they might be good in their own area, there's some things that are less than desirable when it comes to their planning purposes. So we are trying to help you to be able to plan and prepare for the future, prepare for what's coming. Three Blind Mice to the next 5 callers at 800-725-7616. After our break, we're going to talk about the ways that the government can be able to get this $7 trillion from us. We'll be right back after this.
I'm David Scranton, founder of the Retirement Income Store. If you're in or near retirement, are you certain you have the right retirement plan in place? Do you want to help ensure your nest egg will last you all throughout retirement? Take our retirement review quiz and find out in 5 minutes or less if you're doing everything you can to achieve a more successful retirement.
Visit us online at agemy.com. That's AGEMY.com. Welcome back to Financial Strategies with Andrew Agemy in Connecticut and Daniel Agemy in Colorado.
Several years ago now, John and Mary came in to do some estate planning. John was very concerned that their assets as such were going to be taxed by the federal government upon their death when John and Mary both passed away because the inheritance laws, the estate planning exemption at that point was only about $1 or $2 million or so. So they had bought, the attorneys came in and said, John, Mary, I think that, one of the best ways for you to be able to protect yourself against this estate tax situation that you have going on here is to open up a life insurance trust, and then you'll gift money into this trust every year. And then when you pass away, the money, the life insurance policy will pay, and it will pay tax-free to your beneficiaries from that standpoint, and give them either the money to pay the taxes on your estate or not. And so John and Mary decided that they wanted to put that into play. So John and Mary did exactly that. Then as time went on, what happened? Tax laws changed. The exemption went from a couple $1 million up to today, 5.5 million plus, each with the combined over $11 million. So now, John and Mary, you're facing this situation to where you don't need this life insurance trust. John says, Andrew, I don't need this trust. And I said, but, John, the inevitable is going to happen, right? The inevitable is that laws can change. And that's what we're facing today. That's one of the big issues that is part of the Joe Biden tax plan, is changing of the estate planning laws. I'm Andrew Agemy.
I'm Daniel Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies. Today, we're talking about the topic, they're coming for you. Dad, the coming for you is to do with people who have done a good job of saving, people who have built up $3-4 million. And to generate that $7 trillion Yellen is talking about from tax revenue, finding money is a few different things, like that inheritance tax, right? That estate gift tax that you're talking about with that trust, that you can put money into that trust to hide from that. That's one of the huge things that they're talking about, lowering down from that 11.7 to $3.5 million.
Right. And should they do that, that's going to do two things. Number one, there's not that many people that have, there's not as many people that have $11 million of an estate compared to as many people as have $3 million of estate these days. I mean, I've seen very easily with just, Henry and Molly, American, having $3 million in their IRA programs from that standpoint, let alone their house.
Hey, well, I think people forget about the house, or their house and the house on the lake, right? Like
right.
People have built up some wealth. I look at people here in Colorado, and like the average house is selling for $600,000. That's average. So if you're not average, right, and your house is $800,000, $1 million, $1.5 million, that's half of your exemption right there.
Exactly. And it's a really interesting thing, Daniel, because they're the exemption is like, for a joint exemption is like $11 million that you not estate paid any tax on. If they bring it down to $3 million, well, so now they're lowering the bar for where you have to pay taxes. And when you have to pay tax for anything over that, you're going to pay, give or take 50% on. So that's huge, right?
Well, they're talking about increasing that. They said the plan is from 45% to 65%,
right,
on money above that $3.5 million.
Right. So if you have a $10 million estate today, you don't pay any tax if you die today, any estate tax, if it's jointly held. But they changed the law to the $3 million, and now you're not going to pay tax on the estate tax. I'm not talking about income tax or all the other tax. I'm talking about estate tax on the $3 million, but you'll pay estate tax on the $7 million above that. And if that's the case, it could be 45% to 65%. So let's just say, make it easy, say 50%. So of the $7 million, you're paying $3.5 million to the federal government. Whereas if you died today, you wouldn't pay anything to the federal government. So they're coming for you. They're coming for your estate. They're coming for the money. They're trying to get that. And so they're lowering the bar on what the credits are going to give you, and what's happening in the meantime too, Daniel. We need to talk about this, how the stock market is going up and real estate is going up, and all these things are going up, which is driving the price up. So what that means is that you're 11, if you have that estate worth $10 million today, well, if you don't die for another 5 years, 10 years, whatever, that could be 15, 20, $20 million. And if the government's going to get 50% of that, ouch, you worked hard for that money.
And sometimes there's not money to pay it. So if it's a business, for example, say your business is worth that 10 million, right?
Right.
And so it passes on to your children or whatever that is.
Right.
And they, you wanted the business to stay in place because you started that business because you cared about what you were doing with that business. Well, were they going to come up with that? What is it? For $3 million, right?
Right.
In order to pay the taxes on that. They got to sell the business, probably,
right.
Unless you have some other way, like you were talking about, if there's a life insurance policy or something set up in order to pay the taxes.
Right. Right. Exactly. And that's huge, right? Because 9 months later, after your death, your kid's going to have to come up with money. If they don't have the money, if they don't have liquid money, they're going to have to sell the business at a fire sale, or part of the business at a fire sale. And, all that you've done has gone out the window. Well, that's why I think, this paper that we have, estate planning paper that we have, a primer to be able to help you and our listening audience to be able to prepare for estate, your estate. Everybody has an estate. If you have any money in the bank account and you die, you have an estate. Okay. So it's for everybody, and different people, different dollar amounts and denominations of what your estate is depends on different aspects of what you need to do. So we'd like to put this paper in your hand. It's called Estate Planning Mistakes to Avoid. And love to, you can have that by calling 800-725-7616, 800-725-7616. Just ask for the estate planning paper. We'll be glad to get that out to you. You're listening to Financial Strategies with Daniel Agemy, as well as Andrew Agemy. Today's topic is they're coming for you. The federal government and the IRS is coming to take your money. And, Daniel, when we go through it, we were just talking about, businesses could be well worth a lot, and those will have to be, a lot of taxes to be paid on that, and that represents a lot of people's life work. Our money is kind of a representation of what we spent our life doing. It isn't, but that is kind of a reward of what we've done in our life. And so when people are faced with having that just taken from them in taxes, that's certainly egregious. And how will they do that? Well, one way is by changing laws, right?
Yeah, I mean, the business and the house, this is a big deal, right? To go from the current 11.7 down to 3.5, right? Because you want the house to stay in your family, right? Or you want the business to stay in the family. But if the taxes are 50%, 45 to 65% on that business or on that house. Now if you haven't started doing, and this is not capital gains tax.
No,
this is not any of these other things. This is only the inheritance tax. This is all right. So now you have, this is huge. You have to start planning, because if you don't, then the things that you thought may happen, like the family will keep the business, the family will keep the house that they grew up in, right?
Yep.
There's no money to pay the taxes on it. They have to be sold just to pay the taxes. This is why we're saying they're coming for you, because it changes. It really changes the outlook for the people you care about if you're planning on gifting or giving things to people you care about.
Exactly. And so one of the laws that they're looking at changing is changing the exemption amount on inheritance and estate taxes, and bringing it down from the $11,700 for a joint for husband and wife into the $3.5 million for that. So that's a huge change. Another change that they're looking at, President Biden is looking at, is changing what's called the bump up in basis. So if you have, a $2 million investment account, and that you have $1 million invested in it, and that $1 million has grown to $2 million. Now, capital gains tax, currently, if you died today, your beneficiaries, your children would inherit that at $2 million. Well, and that's the worst. So they could sell it and not pay any taxes. Same thing with property or any of that kind of stuff. However, if what's being proposed and what has been talked about from his candidacy, et cetera, happens, well, now that $1 million basis stays for the children. So if the children inherit, it's worth $2 million. If they were to go to sell it, well, now they're paying tax on $1 million of growth on that, and that's looking, President Biden's, I think, pushing for 39% tax rate, as opposed to currently capital gains is like 20% at the top bracket. And so that's a lot of money going again to the government. In that example, that's $500,000 going to the government, federal government. Looks like they're coming for us. They're at least coming for our money, right? Today, you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is they're coming for you. And for the next 5 callers at 800-725-7616, we'd like to give you a book called 3 Blind Mice. No obligation. And you can just call and ask for the book, 3 Blind Mice. And it's talking about different advisors that people have and making sure that they're able to coordinate a very good read from Scotty McLean, our friend Scotty in New Jersey. Well, again, you can have that book for the next 5 callers at 800-725-7616. We need to take a break, and we'll be right back after this.
History tells us the market goes up and the market goes down. What would you do if you lost half of your retirement savings? It's time to make the shift to steady, reliable retirement income. And where do you go? The Retirement Income Store. Log on to agemy.com for your free retirement review. That's AGEMY.com. The Retirement Income Store, where retirees go for income.
Welcome back to Financial Strategies with Andrew Agemy in Connecticut and Daniel Agemy in Colorado.
Daniel, it's not uncommon for a retiree to be to be greatly astonished by the amount of taxes they have to pay when they turn 72 years old and have to start out their required minimum distribution. I'm thinking of Susan. Susan came in and she turned 72 years old and had to take money out of her IRA. Susan said, Andrew, why am I paying 22% taxes on this money that I've never been outside the 15% bracket, and now I'm paying 22% bracket. I thought I was supposed to be in a lower bracket when I retired. What's with that? I said, I understand, Susan. You see, that's what they've always said, is that you put your money away into IRAs and 401ks, because you're going to be in a lower bracket when you retire and you'll pay less taxes. Well, Susan, I hate to tell you this, but they lied. I'm Andrew Agemy.
And I'm Daniel Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies. Today we're talking about the coming for you. They want your money. They is the Treasury, the U.S. government, the Congress, right? The people that are spending for the greater good. And it feels more and more as we go here, you have less and less say in actually how that is being used, right? How that money is being used. And some people would say, well, what are you guys even talking about this? We should, the government's using our money wisely. And so I don't care if I have to pay 50% of the money I made, or 50% plus another 25% plus another 7% to the government, right? So if that's you, then you should probably stop listening, because you're not going to like what we're saying. But if you're somebody who said, I'm a capitalist, I earned this money, and I should be able to decide if I want to give it away to people or if I want the government to spend it, then keep listening, because we actually do have some strategies that can help you as we go here.
Yeah, exactly. Good job, Daniel. Excellent. And that's funny that you say that, because what I say to people is, listen, if you're fiscally liberal, then think of all those conservative things the government is doing with your money. And if you're fiscally conservative, think of all those liberal things that the government is doing with your money, right? So, it doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on. The government's doing stuff with your money you don't want them to do. And that's what we're talking about, the government taking more of your money to do more of what you don't want them to do. So, and that example that I gave to you at the beginning of this segment here was to be able to kind of give you what good example of a bad example, right? A good example of what the government does. They change laws. They do things for their own best interest. So the government, when they set up 401ks and IRAs, they put this thing in place and they said, well, you'll be in a lower bracket when you die. But there's a lot of people that are in the same bracket or higher bracket. And right now, taxes are at a lower rate, right? The 22% tax bracket in a couple of years from now is going to become 25% bracket again. And then if you're married and one of you's die, well, you're going to go from the married filing jointly bracket to the single bracket. So taxes are on sale right now. And laws change. And that's what we're facing, is that that Janet Yellen and the government that with this packages that they're trying to put in place want to change the laws to be able to do things, to be able to put more money in the coffers of the government so that they can fund more of these things. And they call it paid for because in their minds it's paid for because it's a done deal. In their minds, that's why it's that way, right? But we have to be careful about that, and we have to be able to figure out, well, what can we do if they're coming for us and for our money? If financially speaking, what can we do to offset that?
Yeah, so there are some different ways. It's a lot of mental manipulation, right? The way we talk about this, like there's $7 trillion we're gonna find. Well, that has to come from somewhere, right? So it's gonna come out of your pocket, or like we're only gonna tax the rich. So if you make more than $400,000 a year,
right,
then that's 39.6%, 40%, and then whatever your state taxes you. If you're in California, I'm sorry. If you're in Connecticut, that's pretty bad too, right?
Right.
So you could be talking over 50%, and you say, well, they're earning $400,000, they deserve that. But when we talk about some of these other laws,
right?
What if you don't make a lot of money, but
right.
you got
You're a good saver.
an IRA inheritance, and you took, $400,000 a year out of that. Now you're one of those rich people that doesn't deserve that money, and 50% of it disappears.
That's right.
You thought you were going to buy a house with the inheritance you got, but half of that, right, disappeared because you took it out of the IRA, and now you're one of those rich people who's making more than $400,000 a year.
Yeah. It's like the lottery. People win the lottery and they go broke, right? Because they have to pay the taxes and they don't think about it and whatnot. It's kind of like the same thing. You inherit a $4 million IRA and you're going to have to take out $400,000 a year, and you become one of those rich people that has to pay extra money. So you're only going to get 200 of the 400 after you pay taxes. Ouch. Well, Daniel, that's where this paper that we have, year-end tax planning comes into play, right? Here we are, we're in October, we're coming up in the fourth quarter of the year, and it's time for people to be actually put into place plans for this year so that they don't have to do damage control next year. They can actually save money on their taxes this year and do some thoughtful planning to make decisions on purpose rather than by default, because having stuff happen the way that things happen. So let's give that paper away.
Okay, well, you can get that paper if you give us a call at 203-738-0026, 800-725-7616, whichever way you like. Or you could hit us up on the website, Agemy, that's Agemy.com. Or if you like email, office@Agemy.com. There's also, we did you were talking about how on estates, everyone has an estate. So if you think you don't have a lot of money and you don't need to do estate planning, we did a blog post actually about that exact thing, and that is on our website, Agemy.com. You could check that out too, and it also gives some strategies on how you can start estate planning and doing some estate planning to get you set up to kind of avoid some of these travesties that are happening right now with tax code and things like that.
Yes, exactly. So if you just joined us, you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. They're coming for you. the IRS, the federal government, they're coming for your money, which is a kind of representation of your life's work, right? So that's what we're talking about today. And things that we can do to be able to protect money, well, being able to understand that taxes right now are at a rate that they're discounted. So if you pay extra taxes right now, you can actually be saving money over the long haul, over the time. You could pay taxes now and convert IRA money to Roth IRA. You can take money that you've already paid taxes on and you can invest it in tax-free investments that won't be taxable from that standpoint and put you in a better standpoint. All kinds of different things that you could do.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things people could do. We look at charitable donation trusts, or you were talking about earlier, a life insurance trust. There's many, many different things, and we obviously can't get into them all right now because it's 100% dependent about the situation you are in. So if you got $1 million, or you're going to get $1 million IRA inheritance, right?
Yeah.
Well, you got to do planning for that, because we just said if you wanted to buy a house and you took 400 out, now you're one of these big tax earners and you only got 200.
Right.
So are you going to cash the whole thing out? Well, or if you're just like, well, I'm going to leave it in there, I'm going to let it accumulate. Then at the end of 10 years, you're going to say, well, now you have to take the whole thing out, and that can cause problems. So depending on what stage you are in life, if you're the one receiving the money, there's certain tax plannings. If you're the one who's accumulated the money, there's also things that can help you out with those things. So it depends totally on each person's situation. But I think we could go into a little bit of broad things with some different types of trusts people could look at, or setting up beneficiaries, or doing Roth conversions, or using life insurance as a way to have money to pay taxes for big things like houses or estates or businesses.
Exactly, Daniel. There's so many different angles, and you're exactly right. It's dependent upon everybody's situation. But the key is that it may not be such a bad thing to pay taxes now, to pay lesser taxes. You're going to pay tax one way or another on money. The question is how
when
much
they're going to find $7 trillion.
Right.
Out of taking money from people, you know that taxes are going up, because Janet Yellen just told you she's going to find $7 trillion.
That's a lot of money.
That they're not already taking.
Right. More, 7 trillion more. And how are they going to do that? Well, estate taxes are a huge thing. Income taxes are a huge thing. And, just pushing the divide, taking away the middle class, either making them go toward the upper class or toward the lower class, whatever the case may be. And that's key there. But that's why we'd like to put in your hands, in our listening audience, you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. We have a book that we'd like to give you today. It's called 3 Blind Mice by Scott McLean. And there's, typically when people are talking about their finances, there's 3 different advisors typically involved. One is the financial man or person rather, and the tax person, and then the law, right? The attorney that's involved with it. And we would need to be able to take these people and be synergistic in coordinating the plan to fit all these areas. And that's an important aspect to do. So we have this book that talks to you about that. If you have a financial person, we'll make sure he or she is talking with your tax guy, your attorney, from that standpoint. Or vice versa. All those different things are going on with this book's called 3 Blind Mice, and we'd love to put that in your hand to the next 5 callers at 800-725-7616, 800-725-7616, and we'll be right back after this.
I'm David Scranton, founder of the Retirement Income Store. If you're in or near retirement, are you certain you have the right retirement plan in place? Do you want to help ensure your nest egg will last you all throughout retirement? Take our retirement review quiz and find out in 5 minutes or less if you're doing everything you can to achieve a more successful retirement.
Visit us online at agemy.com. That's AGEMY.com. Welcome back to Financial Strategies with Andrew Agemy in Connecticut and Daniel Agemy in Colorado.
As people mature and get older, once they've retired and their assets tend to build more and more, and their estate value or they accumulate more and more assets from either taking on more properties, real estate, whatever the case may be, or more investments. And as time goes on, they have more and more money, which is a wonderful thing from that aspect. But the problem comes in that when they die, that there's more money that the government wants from that angle. One of the systems that we have employed to be able to help people to be able to prepare for that is by paying nickels for dollars. By paying a little bit of money now, then upon death, people will be able to have larger amounts of money that has accumulated through a life insurance program and a life insurance trust. This is one of the ways that people have been able to pay less taxes upon their death through estate taxes than not. I'm Andrew Agemy.
And I'm Daniel Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies. Today we're talking about they're coming for you. They need your tax revenues. And that's an interesting concept. We've talked a few times on the show about a cash alternative, right? And how everyone needs some kind of cash cushion. You need to be able to keep up with inflation, and some of these cash value life insurance policies are able to do that. But you're talking about a whole new thing in the fact that you're talking about nickels for dollars. What does that mean?
Well, if you're paying, you pay a life insurance premium, and today, if you pay whatever you're paying today, it's kind of like in comparison to what you get upon death. It's nickels. So maybe you pay $10,000 a year in a life insurance premium, but upon your death, maybe there's $1 million from that standpoint. So in comparison, that's nickels to dollars. Of course, you have to die to be able to get that from a death benefit standpoint. But many times what people do is they think of life insurance, and many times they think of it more as death insurance, because that it will pay upon death. And that's one thing it does. But why life insurance was originally called life insurance was because of the life benefits that it provides for people. And so it can do double duty for people. Whether in your life you can have money to be able to use for your lifetime on a tax-free basis and then grow on a tax-free basis, but during death, it can provide even more money upon death or for long-term care purposes, if that's what people call for in that standpoint. Daniel, when I'm thinking of that too, I'm thinking about the client that we have that has a life insurance trust, has a big life insurance policy in the trust, and it's a cash value policy. And during his lifetime, he's actually borrowing money out of that and investing it in his business, and his business is paying him back that money to put back in there, and it's kind of creating a very synergistic thing. And when he passes away, there's going to be even more money in there while he's getting the value of being able to borrow that money during his lifetime. So he's able to get a lot of different bang for his buck from that angle.
Yeah, when we're talking about that, basically it's a way you can use your $15,000 a year exemption, right? Your gift exemption. And if you're married, you could use your spouses, and you both give $15,000 a year to this trust. And the trust, right, irrevocable trust, owns a policy, and it takes that money out of your name. And right. It takes it so it doesn't count towards, so all the cash in that trust does not count as part of your lifetime exemption, or estate. And then it provides a huge tax benefit because all that money becomes tax free. And whoever it is important to have to cover those estate taxes gets that money, right? So if it's your children, you don't want them to have to sell your house or your business or whatever it is,
Right.
then they get this tax-free income, and that's what you're talking about, nickels for dollars, because you're putting this money in, you're getting it out of the estate, and at the same time generating this huge windfall of a cash benefit so it can pay the estate taxes on whatever that important thing is that you don't want to have to liquidate, or have the estate liquidate to cover taxes in the future.
Exactly. 9 months after your death, the IRS is going to want some money for the estate taxes that are due upon your estate, and that's a way that provides liquidity from that angle for the right people for the right situations, and that's a great option that people have. And it reminds me about how all this stuff is based upon doing planning. I mean, you're not going to be able to do this stuff without thinking ahead. And you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy because people don't know what people don't know. And so we're trying to educate you and help you to understand how you'll be able to take advantage of some of the options that are available to you now to prepare you for the future. And for that, we have a paper we'd like to put in your hand today called Year-End Financial Planning, that as we come down to the end of the year, we're in the fourth quarter of 2021. Before we know it, 2022 will be here. And at that point, it'll be too late to do any tax planning and any other, from that standpoint, you're going to just do damage control. But besides tax planning, is financial planning that needs to be done, estate planning, all these different aspects. We'd love to be able to give you this paper so that you can be prepared for that. And you can have that by calling 800-725-7616, 800-725-7616. Just ask for the financial planning brochure, and we'd love to put that in your hand.
And some people, they also do tax planning to protect them against a lot of these type of things by using required minimum distributions that they don't need, to either fund an insurance policy, which then in turns, when they pass away, it gives their beneficiaries more options because there's tax-free money. They could pay the tax. They could use that money to support that lifestyle. They could use that to pay the taxes on the estate, or they could use it to pay the taxes on the money coming out of the qualified accounts, right?
Yeah.
And that's a strategy people use. They get the money out of the tax deferred account, right out of the IRA,
Yeah.
and they get it into something that is a tax benefit where you can use that money without ever paying taxes on it, or in your passing, it's all tax free.
Right. I'm thinking of Martha, who had been married 3 times. Her first husband, she had some children with her first husband. They had an inheritance from he died, and got some money from him, and she wanted to make sure she passed that on to her kids. And when we met her, she was, I think, if not in her 80s, close to her 80s. And she said, hey, even though she didn't have a ton of money, she had a few $100,000, but she bought life insurance with it to be able to enhance the what her kids would receive on a tax-free basis from that standpoint. So, it's for people from a lot of different age brackets and a lot of different financial categories from that standpoint. So there's a lot of things that can be done to plan for. And the taxation aspect, like you say, Daniel, with the using required minimum distributions to buy life insurance, we have clients doing that all the time because they don't need that money. What do you do with it? You can't convert your required minimum distribution to a Roth IRA, but you can put it into a life insurance policy, which is kind of like a Roth IRA on steroids from that standpoint. So, it's being able to know what you don't know and being able to make plans on purpose rather than by accident or by default.
So some of these things work real well if it's looking into the future to see what your estate is valued at, how much money will be passing on to each individual you care about. So if it's a business, or if it's your qualified account, if it's your 401k, whatever, how that's passing to the people you care about, thinking about and planning for in advance, so that you can avoid getting whacked with these 40 to 65% tax penalties, tax burdens, and you can actually have that money go to the people you care about. There's some other cool stuff we didn't have to get time to get into, but charitable donation trusts, and there's some really neat things people could do with that. In addition to what we talked about with the Roth conversions, getting as much money as possible so that it's growing and usable, right? You could take it out tax free. The life insurance trusts, as well as there's all kinds of strategies people could use with that to use nickels to get dollars.
Exactly. Daniel, we mentioned that charitable donation trust, if you're listening to us, one of the things that does is you're able to give money to charity, that you get a tax break now, but get income now, and then upon your death, the money goes to the charity from that standpoint. So you can get a lot of different, depending what you're trying to do. I mean, some people have children, they want to pass the money on to the children, but some of the money they want to pass on to a charity, and it allows them to do that and still get advantage during your lifetime from that standpoint. And then, all these things we're talking about, comes, when it comes to estate taxes, and if you're giving to charity, you have to make sure you're giving the right money to charity, right? You want charity, give money to charity that is taxable money, ideally, and give tax-free money to your beneficiaries. So there's different ways of doing that you have to take into consideration. And, that reminds me of this book that we have, Three Blind Mice, which is using your financial person, your tax person, your legal person, your attorney, to be able to put together a plan that's coordinated, as opposed to so many times they are not working together, and it is not a coordinated plan. It should be a coordinated plan. Let's put this book in your hand, Three Blind Mice by Scott McLean, and you can have that if you're one of the next 5 callers at 800-725-7616. Daniel, we have to wrap up here. Do you have any final words?
Remember that there's a lot of uncertainty in life, right? There's a lot of uncertainty with all these tax plans, all these tax changes that may be coming upon you, with markets, with all these different things. And diversification and planning are the two things that will be able to protect you the best into the future, is having a plan, knowing what you want to achieve and where you want to be, and then using that as a roadmap so you can get to where you want to be. That, I think, is the most important thing that people could take away from this.
Excellent. You've been listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy, because people don't know what people don't know. And we want to make sure, we want to educate you so you can make smart decisions. And one of the things we want you to have is a stress-free retirement. We want you to enjoy retirement. We want you to have a stress-free retirement. And we're glad that you're listening to us, because you too can have a stress-free retirement.